It's gotten so bad or good at the southern border, depending upon your perspective. Human smugglers' only customers now are illegals self-deporting. The smugglers are no longer working to get them into the country. They're working to get them back to their home country. Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador. This is as illegal border crossings have dropped by 94% from a year ago. 94%. Let's get into it. Here we go. So do you remember when all the Democrats were saying, when the Democrats actually realized, you know what? This isn't a good look. All this crazy stuff going on at the southern border, it's not a good look because Sleepy Joe has just let millions of criminal illegal aliens into the country. And this isn't looking good because the American people are going, we don't want them all here. Don't bring them in. Don't bring them into our sanctuary city that we have no control over. Our government said, we're sanctuary city, greatest thing ever. And then we realized how much money it would cost. And we're like, no, don't do that. And it became a real political hot potato, right? It just all of a sudden, are you a sanctuary city or are you one of the cities that are saying, no, we don't want them here? But as that narrative kind of flipped, the Democrats all said, you know what? We would have legislation in place that would help secure the border, but those stinky Republicans, they wouldn't vote that in because it was a piece of crap legislation that would have elevated the number of illegals coming in permanently. And all they needed to do, all the Biden administration needed to do was what Trump did, which Trump is doing now. Yeah. And the numbers just whoop, shocker. What a shocker. When Biden and Kamala Harris, they spent so much time saying, if only we would have had that legislation. You didn't need that legislation because it was just going to make things worse. You just actually have to have a secured border. Remember when Greg Abbott, he just started going ham with his Operation Lone Star, and all of a sudden the federal government is suing Texas because Texas is actually defending the southern border, which is their state boundary as well. Remember that? There's all these lawsuits flying back and forth between Biden and state of Texas. I mean, almost incomprehensible, right? That an administration could be so derelict in the duties of securing the border. Come on in. What was once a well-oiled migrant smuggling machine into the United States has collapsed thanks to President Trump's border enforcement and promise to deport every illegal alien in the country. So to make money now, many of these same smugglers are taking self-deportees back to Venezuela. How awesome is that? The story goes on. It's inevitable, right? You couldn't have this illegals coming into the country run go on forever. Although, if we would have had Kamala Harris in, we would have had 4 more years of that. Thank God that didn't happen. What a train wreck she is, right? I hope she becomes governor of California because, quite frankly, I'll podcast that stuff forever, right? Naturally, the far-left Associated Press reports on this as though it's a bad thing. We're going to read that article in a second. They once braved the jungles of the Darien Gap, trekking days along the perilous migrant passage dividing Colombia and Panama with the simple goal, seek asylum in the U.S. All true, but there wouldn't have been as many asylum seekers and there wouldn't have been people absolutely risking their lives and their children's lives and their daughters' lives and their wives' lives going through this incredibly risky thing if the Biden administration wouldn't have just basically lowered all the guards to getting into the United States. We'll do the border CBP One app. You just app on your phone and come on into the United States. Come on in. Basically, no vetting, no nothing. Now, boat by boat, those migrants have given up after President Donald Trump's crackdown on asylum. So Biden, all he had to do was literally do what Trump was doing. But on day one, Biden stopped building the wall, started a series of 94 executive actions, got rid of that whole remain in Mexico, started using the CBP One app. Oh yeah, just put your information in here and you get a date. Come on in. We'll let you in. We'll just bring you on in. I mean, that was their solution to all these folks coming into the country illegally, is to have them come in illegally with an app. That got shut down. And then also the Biden administration, they wildly abused the asylum of just, hey, we know you're illegal. We don't know much about you, but hey, go ahead and just take off anywhere into the interior of the United States. Should be fine. All good. All good. Just try and be good people out there. Know what I mean? Just crazy. Hey, all Trump did was enforce the law. If people want asylum, there's a legal way to ask for asylum at a point of entry. These folks didn't do that. Former President Joe Biden tried to aid and abet their lawlessness with an app that would grant them an asylum hearing. And here's how that works. It's not the law, and Trump killed the app. So now, after explaining that the boats had until recently been part of a well-oiled migrant smuggling machine that was extremely lucrative for the smugglers, who took advantage of a seemingly unending influx of hundreds of thousands heading to the United States. This is that article. This is the article we're referencing here. They crossed the Darien Gap to reach the U.S. Now, boat by boat, migrants are returning to their home country because Biden made such a press to have all these illegals come in. Just, oh yeah, come on in, come on in, come on in. But now that much of the Darien's migrant smuggling industry has collapsed, some smugglers are taking advantage of the reverse migration to charge steep costs to migrants between $200 and $250 per person, including minors, for the boat rides. So what we're talking about is we're talking about going from Panama around the Darien Gap by water back into Colombia, whereas they walk through Colombia, walk the Darien Gap into Panama. Now, $200. Hey, we'll take you home. We'll get you home. Let me repeat, the author goes on to say, there's a legal process to ask for asylum, and I have no sympathy for those who violate that process, especially if they drag their small children along. Nothing is stopping anyone from legally requesting asylum in the United States. But if you choose to break into our country, our new president will follow the law and deport you. And people are upset about that. People in Seattle are losing their minds. Oh, they're deporting criminals? That's terrible. How dare you deport the criminals? Have you seen these videos of these chuckleheads who are out in the streets and they literally have loudspeakers and they're yelling during an ICE raid? You don't have to talk to them. Just basically enabling criminal illegal aliens to work the system during an ICE raid. It's just, those guys should be arrested too. I mean, aiding and abetting criminals, that's a thing. Toss them in jail. Give them a couple of years. Let them cool their jets. If you break into Disney World, they evict you. If you break into the Warner Brothers studio lot, they call security. If you sneak into CNN's headquarters, out you go. What I love the most about this story is that Trump's unspoken plan is working, and that's to pressure illegals to deporting themselves. Self-deportation saves us a ton of money and is fairly easy to encourage. Within the law, you make life impossible for those here illegally. Employers use E-Verify, landlords request legal ID, you secure the border so people cannot go back and forth. You let every illegal in the country know that they might be next, and people are upset about this. That's what I find just shocking. I mean, it shows you where their values really are. It's not with the American people. It's not within their own communities. It's with the illegals that have come and committed crimes, because that's who ICE is deporting right now. They're not deporting school children. They're not deporting people working on farms that are there. They're only deporting them if they've committed an illegal act and they're a criminal. They're a criminal. And if they came into the country illegally, they're a criminal. You do that and more, and these illegals will give up and go home. I've said this before, and I will never stop saying it. My wife is a Mexican immigrant. She was born in Mexico. It's the author reading, right? But her family came here legally. She became a citizen legally. And no one resents those who jump the line more than those like my wife who followed all the rules. Every illegal immigrant needs to be deported. If they want to go to the end of the line to become a citizen, fine, good luck. Do it correctly and you'll be welcomed. But you got to want to be an American and not just to remit your illegal pay back home while flying the flag of your home country. Yeah, you got to kind of become part of the process here, right? Illegal crossings at U.S.-Mexico border down 94% from last year, Border Patrol chief says. So these numbers were literally starting to drop dramatically when I went to the southern border twice in early 2024. I think I went in January and I think I went in March, something like that, or maybe January, February, early January, late February, something like that. You can check out the YouTube videos on this channel. But you were already seeing the dramatic drop in the number of people coming through that section of Eagle Pass, south of San Antonio. Those numbers had dropped dramatically because all of a sudden there was pushback on illegals just coming across the river, the Rio Grande River. Sometimes I think the most, there was a day in December of 23 where 4,400 illegals crossed the river into Eagle Pass in one day. 4,400. I mean, just the numbers are just staggering. You had a week period where I think 28,000 illegals came across in Eagle Pass. That's a community of like 25,000 people. I mean, the numbers were just absolutely insane. And that's because Biden and his border czar Harris just basically encouraged people to come through. Oh, yeah, come on in. It's all good. Come on in. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. Vote for us in the next cycle. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. Over the past 7 days, banks said Border Patrol agents have apprehended an average of 285 migrants per day along the entire southern border, compared to roughly 4,800 during the same time last year. 4,800 versus 285. So the coyotes and all of the folks just getting people into the country, they've had to drastically change their business model, haven't they? No longer do you have just dozens and dozens all day long around the clock coming across the southern border. You've put a big stop to that. You got 285 per day along the entire southern border. It's just, it's gone to an absolute trickle. That's all the way from California to Texas, out to the ocean, right? Banks attributed the dramatic drop in illegal immigration to a slew of executive actions taken by President Trump that Biden could have taken as well, or just left in place that Trump already had in there. They include an order that has effectively closed the U.S. asylum system and has allowed for summary deportations, as well as the cancellation of the Biden administration policies that allowed some migrants to enter the country with the government's permission on the app. Mind-blowing, right? Formerly Texas border czar Banks also cited the Trump administration's deployment of additional troops to the southern border and a decision to deputize Texas National Guard soldiers, I saw that, as immigration officers to help Border Patrol agents in the field. You know what you had Biden doing? Biden was suing to take out razor wire. Biden was suing to make the border easier to get across, because that was his job, was to let people in the country. That's what the Biden administration did. There's nothing else you can say. You can't defend Biden's position on the border any which way. You just can't. And I have, I'm one of those folks that's been wildly impacted by this, because my 27-year-old son at the time in 2023 took what he thought was a Xanax bar, and it was laced, we think, with fentanyl, and it killed him. We don't really know, because his death certificate says natural causes, but he had a bunch of Xanax on him, and this was during that time period where this was going on. People were dying, normal people, not drug addicts out in the streets, you know what I mean? Normal people were taking pills, and it was killing them because they didn't have the tolerance built up. And my son was one of those. So that happened because the southern border was so weak that drugs were just pouring across it. That was just so easy. I mean, if they weren't running people, they're running drugs, human trafficking, sex trafficking, all of that was just at its absolute peak, right? So I have a special interest in this from the standpoint of what if the border was more secure and the drugs that ended up killing my son didn't get through? Or they weren't, coming through in huge masses. Maybe my son will be alive. Maybe he would have just had his 29th birthday in December, but he didn't. And so we just celebrated his 2-year, I guess you don't celebrate a 2-year death anniversary, but it would have been February 20th was the 2-year that he had died. So, just absolutely horrific as a father. It's just terrible. It's mind-bending. So southern border, I am all for these numbers because now other parents won't have to go through the rest of their lives like I will, having a son that passed away from something that was very, very, very preventable, in my opinion. Did my son make decisions that impacted him, that caused him to lose his life? Absolutely. But so much of that hinges on the fact that you've got, all these drugs just absolutely pouring in because the cartels know that this is game on. Biden has said, game on, bring it through. And that's what happened. And I'm impacted. And so are about, 110,000 people every year. You got a bunch of overdoses. And so many of those, I think 70,000 are now fentanyl related a year. Horrific numbers. So I personally am always super glad to see stories where, hey, we're actually defending the border. We're going to try and stop letting a bunch of those drugs come in. And we're going to try and stop anybody coming in illegally and not welcome them with basically an Uber ride by Customs and Border Protection. Makes sense, right? Absolutely makes sense. All right. That's all I got here. But man, the numbers are way, way, way down on illegals coming into the country. Whew. It's about time, isn't it? About time. Crazy. This is absolutely nuts. That was a nutty period in history. You're doing what? You're encouraging them to come in. You're enabling them with an app. What's up with that? That was just, yeah. All right. That's it for me on this one. Thanks so much for being here. I'll catch up with you in the next one. Bye for now.